Hello and welcome to the Bucket Lister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford, along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. I am your host, Keith Crockford, and today we've got just a short episode because I'm soon to be heading off to the airport to take a trip to Uganda for our gorilla trekking trip. So you're going to be bound to be hearing more and more about that one in the coming weeks. So please do keep an eye on our socials to check out any photos from what's going to be this amazing trip. I'm so looking forward to it. But this week's episode is, we tell people to have a bucket list. We are the bucket list company. We say that everyone should have a bucket list. But this last week really did get me thinking for two reasons. And one reason is I lost a friend of mine last week to a very short illness. The diagnosis came just before Christmas, and they went downhill very, very rapidly, which is very, very sad. And it just got me thinking about bucket lists and this came about really this weekend because I was at the Destinations travel show on Thursday and Friday with the company, and we were talking to hundreds of people. It's such a good show. If you're ever looking for inspiration, then head to Destinations, and they have a show in London every year, and they have a show in Manchester every year, both in January. And they're big travel shows, the biggest in the UK. And they're packed full of inspiration. Hopefully you get enough inspiration from this podcast, but if you need a little bit more, then do head to Destinations as well. But people were coming up to the stand, like lots of people still don't know about the Bucket List company. So it was great to be having conversations with people. And when we asked the question, and one of the questions we normally ask is, what is on your bucket list? And everyone always says, there's lots and lots on my bucket list. And this really got me thinking in terms of, with your bucket list, you also need a YOLO list. And this podcast today is to try and inspire people to think about their YOLO lists. Now, if you've never heard of a YOLO list before, it's a you only live once list. Because you might plan that you want to do 50 places, but if something was going to happen to you within the next year or the next 2 years that prevented that from you completing your bucket list, then you need to think about your you only live once list. And today's really short episode is literally just to get you thinking about your you only live once list. Like, if you were only going to have this 1 year left to do anything, what are going to be the top things that you're going to tick off? People were giving us 20 destinations that they wanted to visit when we were talking to them about it. But which one of those destinations are you going to tick off this year? Or which of those things on your bucket list are you going to add to your YOLO list and really get them done? And I think that's so important, because we can have these lists, but unless we actually take action on them, then it just stays as a list. And for me, that's such a shame. Like, you've got all these amazing things that you want to do, but unless you can prioritize them into the most important things that you want to do and get them ticked off first, then I can't ever see the list happening. And you know what it's like at work. You have your to-do list at work, and you sometimes it's all the easy things that get done first, and the harder things get pushed to the bottom of the list. And then when you write your next to-do list, the same things get added to the list, but you never actually action them. And that's where the YOLO list comes in. So my takeaway from this, like I say, this very short podcast this week, is that create a YOLO list. Think about what's on your bucket list. And that might be, some really, really not hard trips to do, but obviously, we only have so much annual leave. So you've got to prioritize what it is you want to do. So maybe pick off a couple of those things on your bucket lists to add to your only live once list. But then at the same time, think of some of the other easier things to achieve that are on your bucket list. I mean, it could be, simple things like you want to give climbing a go. You might want to learn a language. You might want to go horse riding. You might want to run a marathon. Like, those are things that are on your bucket list that you can easily add to your YOLO list to get done within the next 12 months, the next 18 months. And then you might whack in there an Everest Base Camp trek, or you might have I want to go gorilla trekking. I really want to get that ticked off my list. So really start to think about your bucket list and start prioritizing things and get them ticked off. Because what I don't want is for you to get 5 years time and realize that actually all these places you've wanted to visit, you haven't actually done any of them yet. And the problem with a bucket list, and I know this more than anybody, I work in travel. I spend my time talking about travel. I meet so many interesting people and get to know about new things that I want to do. And my bucket list is ever growing. And I'm probably in the fortunate position that I can tick lots of things off my bucket list. But it's an ever-growing list, and it really needs to be prioritized, and there really needs to be some action taken from you to get that done. And obviously at the Bucket List Company, we are here to help. I mean, that was another conversation that we were having over the weekend is, we're called the Bucket List Company, but obviously, we don't offer everything for everybody's bucket lists. A bucket list is a very, very personal thing to people. We've now got 50 trips that we run, and we just hope that some of those trips are on people's bucket lists. And as a company, what we're doing is we're listening to our customers. Like this gorilla trekking trip that's happening for the first time this week was because it was on one of our customers' bucket lists. And she wanted to do it for her 50th birthday year. And, she basically said to us, well, if you don't put the trip on, I'm going to have to book it with somebody else. So what did we do? We put the trip on, and we've got a great group going out gorilla trekking now. So, we are listening to people like, we launched our Ecuador and Galapagos trip last week. Why did we launch that trip? Because so many of our customers are saying they want to go to the Galapagos Islands. And, we offered the Galapagos Islands as an add-on to Machu Picchu trips. But obviously quite a lot of people have already ticked off Machu Picchu, so they're not going to go back and do it again to add the Galapagos on, which is why we then thought about adding this standalone trip to Ecuador and the Galapagos. But we've got lots of other new trips coming in 2025 as well. And they're off the back of where people are telling us that they want to go. So, we are constantly adding new trips all the time. And, the reason we are doing that is to help you guys tick off your bucket list, but also potentially your YOLO lists as well. Obviously, the other thing we do at the Bucket List Company that others don't do is we give you the opportunity to add those, to pay for those trips on a monthly basis. And that obviously makes these trips a little bit more affordable, a little bit easier to manage. And we've got clients who have got 4 or 5 trips booked over the next sort of 3 years. And they're chipping away at those trips on a monthly basis. So, and, they say to us, the only reason I could do this much traveling is to be able to pay for them monthly. So, go onto the website, check out the trips, see what's on there, see if you want to add any of those to your list or if they're on your lists already, and you can just start chipping away at those monthly. So that's a really good way of doing it. And obviously we do plan quite far ahead as well. So at the minute you can book any dates up until the end of 2026. So right to the end of next year. So great for planning now. But then in March, we will also be opening up dates for our 2027 trips as well. So you can really plan ahead and think about where you're going to go. But my takeaway from today is, if you haven't got a YOLO list, then go and create a YOLO list and start prioritizing what it is you're going to get ticked off in a very, very shorter period of time. Your bucket list is what you want to tick off, hopefully over a longer period of time, whereas your YOLO list is what you are going to tick off within the next sort of 18 months to 2 years. And obviously that's perfect timing for getting a trip booked in as well. Well, that's it from me this week. I need to go and get myself to the airport and meet our group and get to Uganda. We've got a nice overnight flight, which I do like an overnight flight. So I will arrive in Uganda tomorrow morning, which will be perfect, and we can start the adventure. But I'll be back next week with another episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. But until then, thanks very much and goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.